One of the biggest glaring problems I see in the world of spirituality as a student and as a teacher and somebody who meets a lot of people in these kinds of fields is that we somehow tend to keep our sadhana and our life very separate. You
Mm.
just go, you do your ritual, you do your sadhana, and then you go live your life. And like the effects of the sadhana are not being lived in your life, and the problems of your life, the fundamental energetic things are not being brought to your sadhana to become transformed there. They kind of remain as two separate fields that don't really interact with each other, and if it does, it's kind of a random thing instead of a systematic way of bringing that here and bringing this into your sadhana. If you call Kali, imagine her standing on one side of the door and you're standing on the other side of the door, and you call her, she will reach through the keyhole and she'll grab you and she'll pull you through the keyhole. Medicine and spirituality, they're not contradictory because uh, I would say there is no separation between the body and the mind. Do different types of sounds have different effects? Absolutely. I mean, it's the basis, it's a fundamental principle of our tradition. Mantra is a vibration, and the different bija mantras, for instance, have different vibrations, different frequencies, different wavelengths, and they have specific effects on the mind and on the body and on the energy body, on the different koshas, you can say. It starts to change your neural pathways. It starts to change the way you think about things. A lot of the subconscious things start to become conscious, and it forces you to resolve them at a particular conscious level and aware level. And when you start doing that, different types of hormones are produced.
Namaste to everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of our show, the Sadhaks of Sadhana show, on the official Vedic Sadhana Foundation's YouTube channel. Sadhaks of Sadhana is a show about real sadhaks with their real stories. Real sadhaks, real stories. We bring you interesting experiences and perspectives of sadhana by practicing sadhaks from all around the globe, bringing you experiences, perspectives, and much more deeper knowledge and practice about sadhana. My name is Devi Shobha Chandramauli. I'm your host, also a sadhak and part of the Vedic Sadhana Foundation's core team. It brings me so much pleasure to be here before you presenting this beautiful show through the perspectives of sadhaks walking the path of sadhana from all around the globe. As I said, we strengthen our understanding and practice of sadhana and grow stronger as a community that has the same shared goal, which is to get more people to realize the beauty and potential of this wonderful thing called sadhana. Also, as many of you know, the Vedic Sadhana Foundation is an ATG approved not for profit organization dedicated to reviving the beauty and glory of the Vedas and making it accessible to everyone. Through transformative programs and the flagship app, Sadhana app, the foundation reconnects various individuals with their cultural roots, serving humanity through the cause of Sanatan Dharma. Today's guest on the Sadhaks of Sadhana show is Dr. Kavitha Chinnaiyan. Dr. Kavitha Chinnaiyan is a cardiologist, a professor, author, and a spiritual teacher who blends the wisdom of Eastern traditions with the insights of modern medicine and science. She is the founder of the Swatantra Institute, a hub for radical self discovery and ecstatic wisdom, where she offers courses, workshops, retreats, and books on topics such as yoga, tantra, Ayurveda, Vedanta, and non duality. She's also the creator of the Renegade Method, a simple and effective tool for self inquiry and self transformation, which helps people overcome their subconscious blocks and achieve their personal and professional goals. Dr. Chinnaiyan is an initiate in Sri Vidya and non-dual Shaiva Tantra and a disciple of Sri Chaitanya Nandanatha Saraswati. She is the author of four books: The Heart of Wellness, Shakti Rising, Glorious Alchemy, which is about living the Lalita Sahasranama, and Fractals of Reality, which is about living the Sri Chakra. Such a pleasure and honor to have you here, Dr. Chinnaiyan. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Shri Matre Namaha. It's such an honor to be here.
Thank you very much. It's going to be. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Me too.
Let's just begin from your experience as a medical doctor, right? And you are in the profession of healing, curing, and you have a very specific approach, a very special, very unique approach to healing, which is heart medicine, as you call it. And you have also a very strong spiritual side. So, how do you see these two streams mingling with each other? How do you see them complementing each other? And if you can also share your story of how you were led into the spiritual side of your practice, it'll be an amazing story to hear.
So maybe I'll start with the story, and then it'll become clear, how these things come together. So, um, I don't remember a time in my life when I was not deeply interested in the big questions of life. What am I doing here? Why am I here? Who am I? Or what is this world? What is the purpose of life? Kind of a thing, right from my childhood. And so, very early on, I was introduced to this kind of a way of thinking. And I was very fortunate that in high school, I was introduced to Vedanta and the Bhagavad Gita and things by a teacher who was my math teacher in school, but she was also a Sanskrit scholar and an incredibly um, knowledgeable woman in these sciences and these traditions. And and then that kind of formed the basis of my explorations of myself and continued on through medical training and so on. And then after I had my children and I had been training in cardiology, I was reintroduced actually to Vedanta after I had moved to the US and I started studying through Chinmaya Mission in Vedanta and studied for many, many years. And so this was happening in parallel with my life and my training in medicine. And so naturally, when I came into practice of medicine, it was not enough to bring in just the science because of my own personal experiences in deep meditation and the exploration of these very profound kinds of truths of Vedanta. So it was quite natural to bring that into my medical practice. And it began actually in a very simple way when people would come with certain cardiac issues, but not really any structural problems that I could pinpoint. And yet it was created by the mind, and I could tell. And I would teach them simple techniques like breath and meditative practices. And very slowly over time, some of these people would come back and tell me that their symptoms were gone or that they had found unexpected results in their life as a result of this. And then they started asking me, can I bring my mom? Can I bring my husband? Can I bring my sister? Can you teach them? And I said, well, they don't need a clinic visit for me to teach them meditation, you see.
Yeah.
So I started a program in my hospital. It was called Heal Your Heart, and that was open to the general public. Anyone could come, and it was a 12-month program where I would teach them lifestyle practices from Ayurveda and teach them pranayama and meditation and contemplative practices like self-inquiry and so on. And it just became a huge success and ran for about 7 years in my hospital. And then I just got tired of teaching the same thing over and over and instead decided to put that in a book, and that became The Heart of Wellness. So, in my opinion, it's not really contradictory. Medicine and spirituality, they're not contradictory because um, I would say there is no separation between the body and the mind. And um, many, 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 many disorders arise from the mind. In fact, I would go to the extent of saying that there is nothing that does not come from the general field that is the mind, which then becomes concrete in the body and materializes as disorders or diseases in the body. So um, spirituality is not necessarily some woo-woo kind of a thing that's out there, mystical, esoteric. Yes, it is all that, but it's also very practical. And it is to understand these kinds of connections between the mind and body, to understand how you can heal your body by changing your mind. All of that is possible. And I have seen that in my life.
In fact, in almost all your books, you have clearly mentioned in Fractals of Reality and Glorious Alchemy as well, you've said that practicing, you know, whether it is tantra, mantra, whatever it is, when you practice, when you start living the practice, you have these elements show up in your everyday life. And your books are about integrating the spiritual wisdom into our daily lives, right? That is your, overarching purpose of writing those books. If you can, just explain that a little more.
Yeah.
How do those elements appear, and what is that phenomenon that you're really trying to bring into perspective here?
The one of the biggest glaring problems I see in the world of spirituality as a student and as a teacher and somebody who meets a lot of people in these kinds of fields is that we somehow tend to keep our sadhana and our life very separate. You
Mm,
just go, you do your ritual, you do your sadhana, and then you go live your life. And like the effects of the sadhana are not being lived in your life, and the problems of your life, the fundamental energetic things are not being brought to your sadhana to become transformed there. They kind of remain as two separate fields that don't really interact with each other, and if it does, it's kind of a random thing instead of a systematic way of bringing that here and bringing this into your sadhana. So um, uh, my approach has always been to make your life your sadhana. And
mm,
yes, the things that we do, like rituals and specific kinds of anushtanams and the specific kinds of, vows that you take for particular periods of time, they are great. But then if they don't percolate into a meaningful transformation in your life where something is fundamentally changing in you, in other words, you are changing. That is the most important thing that needs to happen. And when I say elements of the Sri Chakra, for instance, start to become alive in your consciousness, it's understanding what the Sri Chakra is actually representing, which is all parts of reality, right? Which is why I call it fractals of reality, which is the macrocosm, everything that's happening in the world, everything that's happening in the cosmos, as well as the microcosm, everything that's happening in the body and the mind, and at the level of the energy, at the level of the prana, at the level of the mana, at the level of the all the different koshas. So nothing is excluded from the Shi Chakra. So, for instance, I'm going about my life, say I'm driving on the highway and somebody cuts me off or some kind of a thing happens that brings up a lot of rage in me.
mm,
Suppose that brings up a lot of rage.
mm,
Then, as a sadhaka of the Sri Chakra, as an upasaka of the Sri Chakra, suddenly I'm drawn to, thinking about Maheshwari.
mm,
Maheshwari lives in this part of the Sri Chakra. She is coming alive in that rage and pointing at something deeper and saying, examine your rage is not being caused by this thing. It is coming from you. And it
right.
lives in you as a result of something you have absorbed from some other time in your life. And if you
Mm,
don't resolve this now, you'll continue to think that the world is causing your rage. And you see, the world does not exist the way it does. Everything exists in me. And it exists in me as all these yoginis, as all these devatas of the Sri Chakra. They live in me because I am the Sri Chakra. You
mm,
see? So that's what I mean by elements coming alive in you, where nothing is outside of the Sri Chakra. You see, something is happening there. I can see the devatas of the Sri Chakra dancing in that situation, in that circumstance. In here, something is happening. Here is, for instance, a nama of the Lalita Sahasranama just becomes alive, and Devi is dancing in this form, in this particular situation. So that is the meaning of upasana, where you are never straying far away from your goal, from the deity, from your practice. Whether you are performing a surgery or whether you're performing a procedure, you're raising your kids, you are driving, you are, playing, doing whatever. You are never straying from it.
You have put it very beautifully. And the example is also very relatable because who has not seen traffic rage?
Exactly. Or simply projecting, our particular issues onto the world and saying, you are causing this in me. And these devatas exist to say that no, nothing can possibly cause something in you. Everything already exists in you. And so each devata, for instance, of the Sri Chakra has both the ability to bring out the darkness as well as lead you to the light, depending on how, where your awareness and your maturity lies in your sadhana.
Yeah. And I reckon it is also the same for any mantra or any sadhana that you do with the utmost dedication and earnestness and with consistency. I think that brings that transformation in you. And the way you have explained that, the microcosm and the relationship, um, it's all about transforming ourselves, right? And I would just like to take you to one of the points that I heard from one of your talks, and it was very intriguing, where you said that the worship of the goddess or the divine feminine, that concept, it has existed in India because it's like an integral part of us in Sanatan Dharma. It's very common, but there are a lot of other cultures as well, like the Greek culture, the Egyptian culture, perhaps the goddess of war, goddess Athena, perhaps like goddess Durga that we worship, right? But now we don't see that so much anymore in those cultures, kind of faded away. Mantra sadhana, as you have beautifully explained, is the primary purpose of it is to bring a transformation in the individual. I would just like to see if this can be extrapolated to a culture. What happens when a culture forgets its rituals, deities, if they're not part of their integral lives anymore? What happens to the culture? And also, I'm really curious to know what are your thoughts about why in Bharat it is still alive and so much palpable, that
Hmm.
energy is still so palpable. Just your thoughts on that.
It's a really, complex and very nuanced kind of, question, and the answer needs to be as nuanced and delicate, I think. Now, with regard to some of these cultures, where, for instance, in the Greek culture or the Roman, the Italian culture, where there were all these different gods, and then they were replaced over time by other kinds of beliefs, and supposedly these things kind of faded away. The goddess kind of faded away or was replaced by something else. Yeah, that is all true, and that has happened in many parts of the world. And what happens to a culture is that a lot of those kinds of beliefs kind of are absorbed in a very subtle way into their present belief. So if you see, um, for instance, I don't know much about this, so I don't want to quote too much from
Mhm.
it. But if you look at, for instance, the Greek Orthodox culture, there, Mother Mary is extremely important. And the some of the rituals that come, even though it's a Christian culture, a lot of the rituals, a lot of the kinds of things that happen in that are absorbed from what is equivalent to the grama devatas in India, they
Yeah.
become inculcated into the greater culture. Okay, so A while ago, I now forget who the author is, and this author of a wonderful paper in an exposition wrote about the importance of lesser traditions and greater traditions. And um, in the context of the Indian culture, for instance, if you look at a lot of the goddess worship, right, whether it is Kali or some of the fierce goddesses, they originated as grama devatas, in small parts of India, in rural parts of India, and they were worshipped as fertility, goddesses of fertility, goddesses that would were protectors of the land and for agriculture and for various elemental reasons and forces and so on. And over time, these lesser traditions became incorporated into the greater traditions, which are, Advaita Vedanta or the Tantric traditions or the non-dual Tantric traditions or Shaktism or Shaivism or whatever. A lot of them became kind of incorporated, and those rituals and those traditions were elevated into the high, into the greater traditions. And so you see the same thing in many cultures where even though that that tradition faded away seemingly, a lot of their rituals, a lot of their beliefs became incorporated into the next thing that came in down there, down in their culture, whether it is Christianity or whether it's some other faith or belief. Even within that, they became incorporated. And so having said all that, in our tradition, which is in tantric traditions, we talk about the supreme divine, whether it is Shiva or Shakti, having five different functions, that is creation, sustenance, destruction, and then two very important functions that we tend to not remember, which is concealing and revealing. So the goddess herself conceals herself, and then
Mm.
she herself reveals herself. So, in other words, not a blade of grass moves without her will. Nothing in this world happens without her will. So if something is lost, it's because she wants it to be lost. If something is found, it's because she wants it to be found. Nothing happens without her will, you see? So if something is lost, so be it, because she wants it that way, right? And but it's never really lost because it's there in a subtle way in the undercurrent of something. Now, why has it kind of been sustained in India? It is um, because these, as I said, these are lesser traditions that are very rampant and kind of spread out throughout India. And so how are you going to quell that? How are you going to quell that in thousands of villages? And you go to India, like every street has five temples, right? How are you going to quell that, right? It's the faith is so strong in these traditions, and it's been an unbroken chain for centuries and centuries, um, and it has been kept up by the beliefs of not just these educated masses, but also
Yeah.
these ones that are in the ground level.
Yes, very well said. That is because um, if it was just the elite, it would have been lost, right?
Yes,
Because
exactly.
because it is with the masses, it is still very much alive. So yeah, thank you for that beautiful explanation. Um, I going from there, because we were talking about integrating this knowledge and this wisdom into our lives. Um, Again, coming back to the individual level and coming back to your you know your profession as a medical doctor, you have this beautiful method called the heart medicine, and you also spoke about how we can integrate it into our lives, in not just in from the perspective of health, but also general well-being. That's what the heart of wellness is about. Now, when I'm just curious to know, when you see your patients, do you also recommend, or how well have you seen mantras work as healing mechanisms?
Mantras are of many different types. The science of mantras is very, very vast and intricate. So there are many different types of mantras. There are Vedic mantras, there are Bija mantras, there are, healing mantras, there are Shanti mantras, and many, many different types of mantras. And the potency of the mantra, right, is dependent on what type of a mantra it is. Because if you are doing mantra sadhana, for instance, if you're doing japa with a mantra that is given to you by a guru, it is, purified and is energized by the guru, and it has 6 different aspects to that. And when you practice with that mantra, it has a very different effect. If you are doing a mantra just to feel calm within yourself, then there are plenty of other mantras. If you are talking about healing something, right? Healing is a very tricky word, in my opinion, because healing is not cure, right? Healing is more holistic. It goes to a deep level of why this thing happened in the first place. A cure is possible in healing, but it's not guaranteed. You may heal from something, but you may not be cured of it. And in other words, when you heal from something, it no longer bothers you, even if you have it.
Oh.
So, and cure means it just goes away. And both things are possible with mantras. But the effectiveness or the efficacy of the mantra is dependent on many, many, many factors. It is dependent on the type of mantra. It depends on who's giving that to you. It depends on the qualification of the one receiving it. It depends on your sincerity and your earnestness in practicing it, right? And whether that mantra is compatible with your system in generally. If you take somebody who is of a very delicate disposition, for instance, and you give them the mantra of a fierce deity, that can shake them up. And before it starts healing, it will shake you up in all kinds of ways. And it'll just create a lot of problems. And if you have the strength to go through it, then you'll come out at the other end healed. But if you stop because of all these disturbances, then you'll end up in a worse place than you began. You see? So it's a very it's not so simple. And this is why it is said you can't just take a mantra from somewhere and start practicing if you don't know all these nuances. There are some very safe, mantras and shlokas you can use, which will not, at least not cause harm. It may not cause a benefit, but for the beneficial things, there has to be a system for it. And that is why there is a system for it. That is, it must be given by somebody, by a guru. You must have the right disposition to practice it, and so on and so forth. And done in that way, yes, it can be very healing.
Thank you. Thanks for that beautiful, once again, elucidating it so well. Here, I do have a question. Is there an effect of particular qualities or kinds of sound on the consciousness, and does that influence our state of well-being? And is the point of mantra sadhana to become one with that particular quality of sound?
Yeah. So do different types of sounds have different effects? Absolutely. I mean, it's the basis, it's the fundamental principle of our tradition, which is that of shabda or nada, and in fact, all of this philosophy can be explained by means of resonance and frequencies and wavelengths of different vibrations. In fact, that is what a mantra is. A mantra is a vibration. And the different bija mantras, for instance, have different vibrations, different frequencies, different wavelengths, and they have specific effects on the mind and on the body and on the energy body, on the different koshas, you can say. And so their effect is because they have a different frequency and they create that frequency. And so when you practice with that bija mantra for, you know, thousands, millions of times, you are continuously doing that japa, 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 japa. What happens is it starts to create that effect on a very cellular level.
Mhm.
And depending on your earnestness, depending on your shraddha, depending on your devotion and dedication, that can start to change things at the cellular level. Now, what does that mean? It starts to change your neural pathways. It starts to change the way you think about things. A lot of the subconscious things start to become conscious, and it forces you to resolve them at a particular conscious level, an aware level. And when you start doing that, different types of hormones are produced because they are driven by these neural pathways. When different types of hormones are produced, those hormones have different types of effects on the various parts of the body. Importantly, the autonomic nervous system starts to change. The sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system are affected by the vibration of the sound, and they start to respond to that. And this happens over a very long time.
Yeah.
That's why it is said every syllable requires 100,000 repetitions. It's not a precise 100,000. It's not like at 100,000 something magical is going to happen. It's just saying that over time, after a very prolonged time, it starts to change these neurohormonal pathways in this particular way. Why 100,000? Because that's how long it takes to dig up those, deeply buried kinds of things, patterns, and to change them. Remember, it's taken lifetimes to produce a particular pathway. It's going to take as long to undo those pathways. So yes, each syllable will have a different effect on the organism. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a really good time to also talk about why the Sadhana app is made the way it is. Because you just spoke beautifully about the effect of um, the seed syllables and the effect of listening to them or chanting them so many times. The Sadhana app also has about 150 awakened mantras by a guru, by Om Swamiji, who has awakened them himself. When you said that each of these mantras, it depends on who is giving them, how it is done, how it is pronounced, how many times, what is the right guidance, how to follow it. I mean, all of that is coded in the Sadhana app, and it's just wonderful for whether you're a beginner or an adept, right? To be able to use the app and progress on the spiritual path. And I would just like to also understand your thoughts on how, because I know you're familiar with Om Swamiji's work. I have seen your bibliography, in your books, and you have mentioned his work as, as a source for your work as well. So I'm just curious to understand what your thoughts on this integration of technology with, ancient traditions and, the science of mantras.
Well, first of all, I have to say my pranams to Swamiji, and I have great regard for him, and he has been extremely supportive of my work, and so I really have the highest regard and respect and love for the way he teaches and for the way he does things, and it's just phenomenal how he has brought together his knowledge of technology and his knowledge of these ancient sciences together in this sadhana app. And it's such an incredible way of uh, you know dispersing this knowledge in a very authentic way that does not take away the the rigorousness of the sadhana, because sadhana is rigorous, and he will be the first one to tell you, considering how rigorously he practices himself. And so and that seriousness, that gambhirata is there in that, and it's not frivolous where it's just something is being shared kind of randomly. It's very systematic, and it comes from his vision, which is um again very authentic. So yeah, I have really a lot of excitement for this app.
Thank you very much. And thank you once again for being on the show and taking time off your very, very busy schedule. Um, Also, I mean, this is just for my curiosity. You had mentioned in one of your talks again that even now, I think you mentioned it when um, you said that if a person if a person is of a certain nature and picks up a mantra of a different nature, uh, and in your previous example also you had said that if you're worshiping Kali, I think that was the example. If you're worshiping Kali and she is going to, cut off all your attachments, are you prepared for that? So if you can explain that a little more.
Yeah, I'll quote my guru actually. He's like that's the best thing to do, right? Because he was telling me once about Kali sadhana, and he said, "Amma," and in a very typical way of speaking, and he said, "Amma, if you call Kali, imagine her standing on one side of the door, and you're standing on the other side of the door, and you call her, she will reach through the keyhole, and she'll grab you, and she'll pull you through the keyhole." She doesn't care about your comfort, right?
Mm,
She'll pull you through the keyhole and it'll hurt. So, but on the other hand, if you call Lalita Devi, she'll come to you very playfully. She's a very Saumya goddess,
mm,
right? Even with Lalita Devi's sadhana, she will cut off your attachments because remember, in the Lalita Sahasranama, it says Nirmama Mamata. She will cut off that mamata, that attachment. However, the way these deities work is very different.
mm,
Uh, Kali is only concerned with liberation.
mm,
She's not concerned with anything else. You call her, she will come to you. And then she will, start to do the work, which is not going to be comfortable because she doesn't care about your comfort, right? But you call upon a Saumya deity who is, more Shanta, more, playful, more settled. Then they work in a very quiet, when in a very sweet Lalita Devi, I mean, Lalita means playful. So she, in a very playful way, she will grant the same kind of thing. So it's a different, it's really um, what what is the approach that is right for you? And for a given sadhaka, it's not that there is only one or the other. It is at different points in time, you may be called to different sadhanas. You may start off with a Saumya goddess and then go to a Raudra goddess. You may start off with a Raudra goddess and then you may come to a Saumya goddess. It all depends. So as your nature changes, your attraction and your compatibility with these deities also changes. Because remember, deity means it's an energy.
mm,
It's again a vibration, a frequency, and a wavelength. So that wavelength, that frequency, if it doesn't match yours, you're going to have a problem, right?
mm.
That is the foundation of mantra sadhana, tantra sadhana, yantra sadhana, all of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a very, I think I enjoyed this conversation a lot. It was very organic, very interesting. And you were very gracious and so knowledgeable, of course. So thank you for your time once again. And I hope our audience enjoyed this session just as much as I did, at least. And
It you.
yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, just stay tuned on our show as we bring you more and more such sessions with more such interesting and very knowledgeable speakers and more such perspectives on the path of sadhana. And this will help you enrich your sadhana journey wherever you are on your journey. And if you want to be notified of every new episode, and not miss a single one, please subscribe to the Vedic Sadhana Foundation's official YouTube channel. And once again, thank you very much, Kavitha ji, for your time. You had to take out time from your very busy schedule. I know you've just come back from India, gone back from India, or rather. So thank you for making it. And namaste, namaste, and namaste to everyone watching this show. Until next time, goodbye.